She stood on the far side of the room, her arms folded across her chest, and her shoulder braced against the wall next to the window. Her gaze was fixed on something outside of that window. The opening was too small for her to climb out of, and they were too high up for an escape attempt anyhow. Elander had no doubt that she had attempted that escape all the same. And some strange part of him wished she had managed to get away.
Thorn?
At the sound of his voice, she tilted her head in his direction, but didn't fully turn to face him. Thorn wasn't her real name, of course. Just a nickname he had given her. Although none of the titles she had given him were real either, it turned out. Her true name was Valori de Solison. Her friends had known her as Casia Greythorne for years, and by at least a half-dozen other aliases before that. And to him, she would likely always be that thorn in his side. She hadn't complained about him teasingly calling her this, because names meant nothing to her either. They had that in common. "What do you want?" she muttered, gaze fixing once more on the darkness outside the tower window. He stepped deeper into the room, surveying the broken shards of the ceramic pitcher and the puddle of spilled water glistening on the stone floor. He found himself fighting off another foolish grin, gave his head a little shake, cursed himself for the way his guard seemed so eager to slip, his carefully constructed plans to crumble whenever he stepped into the same space as this woman.
Damn this woman.
"I'm not sorry about any of that," she informed him.
"I suspected you weren't."
He knelt and casually started to stack the broken pieces together. At the sound of those ceramic bits scraping against one another, Thorn finally turned and let her eyes lock onto him. She didn't speak. She only watched him. Her gaze followed those shadows that billowed around his body, then roved over the dark patterns across his forearms and neck, before finally settling on his silvery blue eyes. He was not in his full god form. He could no longer take that form, even here in Oblivion. But he was close enough to it that he held her gaze despite what appeared to be repeated attempts to look away. The power this haven lended to him had heightened his senses far beyond that of a normal human, so he could hear her heartbeat quickening, her breaths turning increasingly shallow as she forced them into her lungs. The tension wrapping her body seemed to leap the space between them and settle, tight and rippling, against his own skin. He rose back to his full, towering height. Her chin remained defiantly lifted, afraid but determined not to show it. A lesser woman would have been cowering in the corner at the sight of him in this form,